A good first act in a game is infectious. It will suck the player into the game and get them hyped for the journey to come. It'll teach the player the basics of the gameplay and present them with the overarching drive for the game, while also giving the player both good extrinsic and intrinsic reasons to continue. But above all, the first act just needs to be fun. Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy's first act, is all of the above and more, and I can't wait to gush about it. Alright, so some of the hallmarks of a first act of a game include an opening cinematic of some kind to introduce the main conflict of the story, a tutorial level of some kind to teach the player exactly to, how to play the game, and what the core gameplay loops of the game are, and then a set of levels that will gently, depending on the game, test the player's skill with the core gameplay loops. Above all though, the game just needs to make sure to not overwhelm the player with a wave of mechanics, but it also has to make sure that it doesn't go on so long that it feels like there's no end in sight. There's a perfect little sweet spot to be found, and Jak and Daxter finds it. The game begins with a cutscene narrated by Samos the Sage that starts off with this mysterious and cryptic speech about the backstory of the world and how the story begins.
I have spent my life searching for the answers that my father and my father's fathers failed to find. Who were the precursors? Why did they create the vast monoliths that litter our planet? How did they harness eco, the life energy of the world? What was their purpose, and why did they vanish? I have asked the plants, but they do not remember. The plants have asked the rocks, but the rocks do not recall. Even the rocks do not recall. Every bone in my body tells me that the answers rest on the shoulders of a young boy. Oblivious to his destiny, uninterested in the search for truth, and rejecting of my guidance. And why would he want to listen to old Samos the Sage anyway? I'm only the master of green eco, one of the wisest men on the planet. So it seems the answer begins not with careful research or sensible thinking. Nay, as with many of fate's mysteries, it begins with but a small act of disobedience.
And his tone immediately pivots to a comedic one. The scene then goes on to show us two very... Sorry, what was I talking about? The first act, yeah. The first cutscene overall does an extremely good job at balancing and establishing what the tone for the game is going to be, along with showing us the villains. There's an underlying tone of mystery and intrigue due to the focus on these precursors that came before, but also there's this lighthearted charm that comes from our dynamic duo and the characters that inhabit the world. Jak is our silent protagonist, and while he doesn't say anything in the cutscenes, he has more than enough personality, especially when interacting with Daxter, who has enough personality for the both of them.
I'm not your mom. You see any feathers here?
Really, Jak and Daxter shine as a duo, and the dynamic of the quiet, wholesome guy with the loudmouth that, to his own detriment, can never shut his trap is extremely entertaining, especially when nearly every other character in the game takes every chance they can to roast Daxter, and we can see Jak snickering along to their roasts. The dynamic between Daxter and Samos is probably the most entertaining in the game.
You finally took a much-needed bath, but in a bathtub filled with dark eco.
Look, old man, are you gonna keep yapping, or are you gonna help me out of this mess?
I'm gonna keep yapping, because in my professional opinion, the change is an improvement.
And the cutscenes overall in the game are just really fun, even if they're really only there to give us quests. And speaking of the quest design in this first act is very well implemented. The first cutscene sets up the main gameplay loop and path to Tutorial Island in a pretty funny way. This first cutscene, while it is full of exposition, is so tightly written, expressively animated, and well voiced that it doesn't really feel like exposition. As the cutscene tells and shows us, there's three main ways to find precursor orbs and power cells, our main collectibles. 1, you complete tasks for the villagers. 2, you can buy them from the villagers, or 3, you can just find them out in the wild. And this gameplay loop is really what drives the game. Another thing is this opening cutscene has Sentinel Beach be very heavily emphasized. It's always shown whenever Samos and Kira talk about what tasks you need to complete to achieve the overarching goal of getting to Gaul so we can fix Daxter. I really like this as it helps guide the player to what the first level of the game is without explicitly telling you that it is the first level. And in the wider shots of the cutscenes, they show off the rest of the game to really pique the player's interest. Now that we've gotten out of the opening cutscene and into the game world, there's a lot of freedom presented to the player. We can do as the lovely childhood crush mechanic lady says and go talk to the villagers to see what power cells they have. We can do just as Samos asked and go to Sentinel Beach to fix his green eco collectors. Or we could just explore the levels in whatever way we please. Naughty Dog does a really good job at making sure the player knows what the proper path is so they learn everything about the game, but they also keep things open enough for repeat playthroughs so the player isn't funneled into one specific direction. They can take all the knowledge they've gained from their first playthrough and utilize it in their second, third, fourth, so on. Now, Sentinel Beach is the first official level of the game, and it executes these concepts very well. There's a very clear flow to the level and a very clear design philosophy that gets established. Environmental waypoints and looping level design. Every single main level in Jak and Daxter has some kind of prominent environmental feature that guides the player through the level and acts as a bit of a nexus to the rest of the challenges in the level, and each of the levels loop back around to the beginning to keep the connected world intact. These environmental waypoints serve as a good way for the player to easily orient themselves within the game world, and specifically in Sentinel Beach, it teaches the player something valuable. Sometimes you have to explore the other levels to be able to fully complete others. In Sentinel Beach, there's 2. The first is a tower on the water that has a cannon to the top, but unfortunately we can't reach it yet because we don't have access to the blue eco needed to use the launch pads. And the second is the waterfall with the 2 precursor robots built into the mountain behind it. This then segues us into the second level of the game, the Forbidden Jungle. Now, if you've spoken to Kira and or the mayor right after Samos lets us go free, you'll have picked up on the fact that there's a power source of some kind in the area to the right of Sandover Village, and you should go check it out. So, you go over to the Forbidden Jungle, and immediately the vibe changes from the calm, chill, and somewhat mysterious beaches of Sentinel Beach and Sandover Village to a more mysterious and foreboding jungle. The Forbidden Jungle carries over the same core concepts from Sentinel Beach and takes them to the next level. The entire level is one big circle with the precursor temple in the center to guide and build intrigue within the player. The entire level can be beaten in one continuous loop. Here's where the game truly teaches you that there are secrets hidden beneath the ground that will open paths in separate levels, or in certain cases, a new level completely. Under one of the bridges in the Forbidden Jungle is Kevin Conroy, who did such a good job voicing the pirate that I didn't know he voiced him until I was 20. I was born the year the game came out. I'm old. Anyway, Kevin Conroy makes a deal with us, catch 200 pounds of fish, and he'll let us use his boat to get to Misty Island. Well, I'm gonna be honest, I was always a little confused as to why we didn't just steal it like we did in the cutscene, but I'm getting sidetracked. After that, the game leads you to climbing the top of the Precursor Tower, which is a really cool moment that kind of started Naughty Dog's classic of showing off the whole game world from a high vantage point. Seeing the whole game world, while, it may not be much when compared to today's standards, but back when I was like 6 years old playing this game, my mind blew open. It was insane. I didn't think this was possible. But it's really an effective tool to get the player hyped and eager to continue playing. You get to see exactly where you have been and where you are headed. There's so much to this world, and it's just waiting for some brave adventurer to find. You can descend into the temple if you want, and once you do, you'll find the silo for Blue Eco that can be unlocked. Once you do that, it opens up new pathways in this area and areas in the game. Specifically, back in Sentinel Beach, now you can make your way up to that cannon and collect the last of the power cells and precursor orbs for that level. But back in the Forbidden Jungle, you can now open up previously locked doors that lead you to a dangerous secret. A flower. If you've noticed, throughout the Forbidden Jungle, there's been these vines that creep out of the ground and try to cop a feel of Jak as we run past. Well, This is the culprit. Hidden beneath the Precursor Temple is a giant flower that is completely missable, but it also shows the player that every time you open something, there will be a reward for it. And these detours will also loop right back around to the beginning of the level, with the jump pad placing you right in view of the next objective, the mayor's power line. Connecting the blue eco beam from dial to the village will see you get placed right at the start of the level, completing the looping level design, and setting you up to go collect your reward from the mayor and to go to Misty Island. Of course, if you've collected all 20 power cells from the levels, Kira will radio you and let you know that you can go through the Fire Canyon if you want. She'll do this every time you leave a level until you go through. However, there's one level left that will complete the first act. Misty Island is one of the 3 optional levels in the game. It's not required for you to go there to complete it, and you can just skip it to continue. However, it is still part of the first act, so I'm gonna talk about it. If the Forbidden Jungle is where the turn to mysterious and foreboding took place, Misty Island takes it a step further by being the most hostile area of Act 1. There's no friendly NPCs or calm chill vibes from the music. There's not even Kevin Conroy. Come on. It's all danger and spooks. Skeletons of massive beasts are scattered across the level. You climb all over them to get to different areas and make bridges out of bones sticking out of the ground. There's a precursor arena you can venture into where the enemies will ambush you. However, now they drop a new type of eco, red. Red Eco will boost your attacks, making them stronger, allowing you to deal with multiple opponents. Once you defeat the ambush, you start to see more of the mechanical side of the world. Ugly, industrial-like mechanical structures that will later spread to other areas of the world, but this gives us our first taste. However, we can stop them and their operation while we're here. Misty Island also goes on to give us our first little soiree with zoomer gameplay. No, I don't mean the game becomes a debt simulator. The name of our hover bike. The zoomer is pretty agile and responsive, and Misty Island works as a nice little tutorial area before you get to the Fire Canyon, but again, the level is not necessary, and Naughty Dog accounts for that, but that's for another video. Every level of the first act of Jak and Daxter is just a slow ramp up in terms of mechanics and vibe. Sandover Village and Sentinel Beach start off as very charming and fun with hints of mystery around the precursors. The music is super chill and there's not much urgency, so you are encouraged to just kind of mess around and explore. These levels also present the player with a slow ramp up in difficulty with the challenges. There's very simple platforming, the enemies come at you slower and most of them are stationary. There's no instant fall deaths. If you fall down, you can pretty much just come right back up and try again without dying. The challenges for power cells range from simply spotting them to beating a pelican to it. They're simple, but they all work to build the player's skills up. Then as we move into the Forbidden Jungle, everything gets ramped up a bit. Enemies will run directly at you, they'll pop out of the trees, they'll require a bit more thought and timing to kill, as some will wear spikes for a bit and you have to wait until they're vulnerable, or they'll just play leapfrog with you, which I feel like that's actually kind of fun. There's traps and explosive barrels that will damage you on contact. Missing jumps becomes deadly as you can land on spikes and take damage, or you could just straight up fall to your death. There's a freaking boss fight. The mystery of the precursors is put front and center for you to be drawn into the world even further as well. And finally, Misty Island is really the final optional test for the player. The Forbidden Jungle is where the player solidifies their skills with the game, and Misty Island just works as an extra little practice test to help the player become more comfortable in their skills. It introduces the zoomer gameplay earlier, getting the player ready for more vehicle gameplay and for the more power-ups that are soon to come. The best part of this all, though, is that no matter what order you complete these levels in, the first act always loops you back around to the Fire Canyon, so you are prepared and ready to get to Act 2. It's all a perfect setup to get the player ready to dive into the deep end when Act 2 hits, and I love it so much. It's amazing.